Welcome to Dead Scared Draws. I am your host, Pierce Horvath, and on behalf of Dead Scared Entertainment, I would like you welcome to today's illustration of Bela Lugosi as Dracula. Now, this film not only serves as episode 2 of Dead Scared Draws, it also serves as Dead Scared Entertainment's 91st anniversary of Dracula, released on February 14th, nationwide, in 1931. This serves as our anniversary celebration, and we are so excited to have you be a part of this. So today, with that being said, we're going to be talking a little bit about the film's history, a little bit of some history about the story of Dracula, some fun facts about Bela himself, as well as talking about the idea of using reference and what's considered cheating in this art. Now, here's some previews of the actual image, and now we're going straight into the piece. Now, if you notice, kind of like I did with my first video featuring Sabrina. Now, if you have not seen episode 1 of Dead Scared Draws featuring Sabrina Spellman, go ahead after this and watch this episode. They're not chronological in any way, shape, or form. You can watch them as standalones. But to touch first on this, since we're noticing the back and forth use of the picture, you're probably thinking, Pierce, you're cheating. How can you do that? You're using an image. You're just going in and you're tracing stuff. Not true. What I'm doing is a classic process done by many famous commercial artists. Essentially what it is rather than going in and spending so much time with the model and tracing things and making it a point to get that exact likeness, it's easier to just go in and... Now, they use projectors, so what they would do is they would project either an image or a slide of some sort onto the canvas or whatever board they were working on, and then they would trace based on that, make some edits based on what they felt was right, and then they would go in, paint or pastel or whatever medium they were using, and create the image that they were looking for, the composition that they had in mind. In my case, for the sake of time, which is something that is eventually, once you get into commercial art, as I have commercial illustration, working with clients, working with a brand, time is your most precious asset. Money is obviously too, but time is your most precious asset. You can gain money and you can be more efficient with time, but you're never going to get time that you lost back. Remember that, artists. Remember that. So what I'm doing is I took some time to just trace some of the major highlight areas and light and shadow areas in the piece, as well as some details that help create the likeness that we're looking for. Now, I purposely chose this image because of the fact that it is extremely haunting. Now, don't get me wrong. If you look at all the pictures of Lugosi in this film, he is 99% of an image when it comes to this film, or practically any film that he's featured in my opinion. He has this sort of gravity, this sort of gravitational pull as an actor. Mind you, the majority of it lives in his eyes and in his hands, which is key when you're creating a strong personality. Animators know this, comic book artists understand this, just anybody who works with people, whether creating them on some kind of two-dimensional form or even a 3D form, or like now acting, the hands and the eyes tell the story. And Lugosi, or how I refer to him, Bela knew how to use that to his advantage. And that's why when you look at him today, or you look at the image of Dracula in general, there is no other man, living or dead, that can truly replace the image that he created for this character back in 1931. Mind you, he was already taking on this image back in the 20s, the late 20s. He was playing this role on stage for quite some time, and actually played opposite Edward Van Sloan as well. And if I'm not mistaken, Herbert Bunston, if my memory serves me correctly. And since we're kind of slowly but surely going into actually some of the facts and trivia of the film, I could start talking about some of those bits and pieces. But before I do that, just want to let you know that I'm covering these major areas at first with some painterly and pastel type brushes, and I'm just experimenting with the look. I wasn't sure whether I was going to go in with a legitimate paintbrush to create the smoke effect, or if I was going to go in with one of like the Adobe type brushes. Like if you're looking for a huge plethora of free Photoshop brushes, go get yourself, if you haven't already, an Adobe Creative Cloud account. Look up free brushes, I think by Kyle, if I'm not mistaken. I'll try my best to leave a link to that in the description for those of you who use Photoshop and are subscribing to the Adobe Creative Cloud. So I wasn't sure if necessarily I was going to go in and use 1,001 different brushes to my advantage, or if I was going to be really simple and use like maybe 2 or 3 tops. But back to some interesting trivia about the film and about the history of the story, as well as Bela too. So first and foremost, this film was the first sound horror film created. Now, prior to this, you had a huge amount of silent horror films. You had Haxan, Faust, The Golem, Frankenstein, Nosferatu, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and Dracula even was produced at a time. There was a version of it that was made for those theaters that were still looking to be converted into talkie theaters, meaning like essentially that featured film with sound, syncopated sound. So there was at times a version of Dracula that was shown in the style of the silence. And that being said, if you listen to the films that I've mentioned prior to this, like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, The Golem, Faust, Haxan, those particular films come from the style sense of German Expressionism, which was innate in one of the film's key crew members. And that film crew member was Karl Freund. Now, for you cinema freaks, Karl Freund should be a very familiar name, especially if you're in the world of television, because he was the pioneer of the 3-camera setup for television sitcom that was popularized during his time working on I Love Lucy. Now, Karl Freund was the cinematographer for Dracula and was Todd Browning's right-hand man during the production. Now, another great fact that I noticed this from my own experience just trying to research this film in general. I've written college essays on this. I have dived into this film again and again, trying to find little bits and pieces, a part of so many Facebook groups. The community around Dracula, around Bela Lugosi, around classic Universal horror is so rich. It's so hard. It's honestly, at this point, I could throw a rock out my door essentially, and I could run into somebody who, to some extent, loves the classic cinema that came out of Universal's pictures, between even going back to like now to Lon Chaney Sr., who I was about to allude to, all the way into the 50s. And we were talking about like all that sci-fi and we're talking about that sci-fi stuff that they were producing, Creature from the Black Lagoon, this Island Earth, stuff like that. So originally, Lugosi was not the first choice for this film whatsoever. Todd Browning, the director of Dracula, had his eyes on working with the man of 1,000 faces, Lon Chaney Sr. He was Universal Pictures' golden boy when it came to extreme character acting, to creating striking, terrifying faces, he was the go-to guy. Mind you, Universal originally was not looking to create horror pictures, but luckily, Carl Laemmle Jr. was the man who said, you know what, we're going to make horror pictures part of our business. And sure enough, that choice would solidify them in the history of cinema from that point on. And how did they solidify themselves? Well, they made a film called Dracula, and their eyes were set on having Lon Chaney Sr., their main man for this type of film, be the title character. But sadly, Lon Chaney Sr. happened to suffer a very major heart attack that would leave him, well, as dead can be. And it was a huge loss to the studio, and even like now, decades, almost a century it'll be now that we've lost him, and yet we still feel the effects of his performance, of his craftsmanship, and his complete creativity when it came to this genre on film. And until today, we still hope to reach that level of just sheer artisanal perfection. Mind you, at that time, he was doing what he could with what he had. But more into the film. Essentially, Todd Browning was distraught over the simple fact that like now he lost his main man, as well as Universal. They were unsure how to go about this, and they had a number of options open. And Lugosi was not number one. He was not number one whatsoever in their eyes. Luckily, he was able to make himself available, not only from the fact that he had played the role multiple times on stage, but he also made it a point to let everybody know that he would even do this role for less money. So, Universal, being the savvy, business-minded people that they were, they said, you know what? If you're going to take on this role for less money, if you are going to really push for this hard, we'll give you a shot. Luckily, they did. The rest is history. Now, to kind of go back before I go farther into the story of Dracula, if you notice, I completely started from scratch. And you're probably wondering, wow, what a waste of time. How could you do that? It was looking great so far. When you are working in illustration or doing any creative endeavor, if you can possibly allow your gut to guide the image, I mean, mind you, I'm able to say that looking back as an illustrator over several years working professionally, to the point where I can trust my gut. When you're younger and you're first starting out and you're trying to understand the ins and outs of the business or image creating, like compositional creation, the best thing that you can rely on is the knowledge given to you by your mentors, by your resources, and just pushing through. Create something. Like even in this case now, I'll be fair. I'm looking at this image as I'm going through and I'm noticing some imperfections. Obviously, I'll go in and some of these perfections, or the majority of these, I will be touching up. But then there's a great deal that I left. Because in the midst of this, the reason why I didn't just essentially edit a photo or completely start from scratch and try to draw this myself is because, one, I was trying to be cognizant of my time, as well as the fact that I want to make sure that people know that this was done by a human hand. This was done by somebody who wanted to, rather than emulating life, create an image that is past being and takes on this sort of ethereal presence. So with that being said, my gut was telling me at the time, Pierce, this ain't it. This ain't the ticket. You need to hop on another train. So I waited till the next one came in the station, started with a blank canvas essentially with my rough sketch, went in and I created a base form first. Then what I did was I figured out my palette. I said, okay, I'll work from dark to light and then bounce between 3 or 4 colors within this particular monochromatic palette. And then from that point on, refine the shapes, add some texture, and every now and then look at the reference. Because more or less from this point, I was going based off of memory as well as understanding some of the lines that I created and how they would play in terms of dark and light. And again, perfection was not the goal here. Mood and emotion was everything and still is everything. That's what I go for. The last thing I want is an image that is extremely perfect, because I cannot tell you how many beautiful images I've seen that can be deemed perfect and are lifeless. Now again, that's my opinion, but still, I would rather my work evoke a sense of living rather than being perfect and stale. Let that stuff be out there for graphic designers who love perfection. I like the raw stuff. Give me the raw stuff. Oh, did I mention this is a general audience video? Jokes aside, let's mention some more stuff about the film, because I cannot talk enough about this. And honestly, if you think that this is going to be the end-all be-all in terms of me talking about Dracula, you're wrong. You are totally wrong. I can talk about this film, about Bela, about vampirism, about this whole shebang for days. Honestly, that's why I created DSE, because deep down, I love these things. This is what I grew up in. This is what honestly is innate to me and my creativity. And there's so much of it inside that I can't contain it no more. And I wanted to share it with the world. I have a mission that was given to me, I honestly feel, from God. And now I'm playing with some of the colors. You know, I might actually put up some different options at some point later on. But I feel like I have a mission from God to promote all the spooky stuff, which is kind of ironic, don't you think? But I've learned, and I mentioned in the last Deathscare draws with the Sabrina illustration, which again, if you haven't seen, go out and check. I'll link that as well. Is that even in sheer darkness, you can still find light. You can still find that there's some type of good in everybody. It may not be the exact brand of good, but for the most part, there's a universal altruistic mentality that all living shares to some extent. And I think that's beautiful, that even in the darkest things, there's still some sort of redeemable quality. But in the case of Dracula, we would love to think that that's the case, but he is essentially an incubus of sorts, a human-formed incubus with a sustained unnatural existence and a thirst for human essence, for human blood. Now, I'm describing this in a very grotesque way because I want you to understand that you're looking at a very dapper man. You're looking at a man who is suave and charming in this illustration. But yet, it's almost, I'd like to describe it as an exoskeleton. Not even like a facade or like a shroud. No, it's an exoskeleton. Behind that sleek exterior lives a torturous, diabolical creature that till today in 2022 amazes and terrifies children and adults alike. Think about that. This character, created by Bram Stoker, based on Vlad Tepes from the 1400s, Eastern Europe. He was a ruler of the northern part of what we call modern Romania today. Just think about that. A historical figure translated into modern English for that time, 1897, is still living on today as one of the most replicated and reimagined characters in pop culture, and will remain to be the most reimagined, repurposed, recreated characters of all time. Because deep down, when you think of Dracula, men want to be him. Some women want to be him too, I don't blame them. And in some cases, men and women want to be controlled by him. There's this innate sense of being more than just human. And that's what he is. He has surpassed mortality. He is an immortal. He's undead. And I can't think of anybody who can say they never thought of wanting to be immortal, of having supernatural powers, the ability to transform their being into different animals, or like in the book, into elements of nature like fog, or like now, if I'm not mistaken, I think the book said moonbeams as well, dust. Just amazing, the fact of that this, like even in this version, this 1931 version, it was very much based on the stage play that was adapted from the novel by Hamilton Dean, and I think the man's name, if I'm not mistaken, is John L. Balderston as well. So this film was adapted by those two particular men, and was condensed and in some cases diluted to be a little bit more palatable to the general audiences of the day. Mind you, this was pre-code, so we weren't out here putting PG-13 R on films. Films were films, and the director had to keep in mind to some extent, well, hey, we're gonna have, a mix of people coming in to see this, so we gotta make it juicy enough that we have people coming back, but we can't take it too far to the point that, we're gonna both, or no, the whole crew's gonna end up behind bars. And you know what? I think they actually played it very well. For the time, they played that balance very well. And again, remember, this was the beginning of Universal's legacy in horror. Dracula began it. Even though we had the Phantom of the Opera prior, Hunchback of Notre Dame as well, Dracula began America's fascination with horror. It truly began Western culture's love for thrillers in cinema. That is why till today, horror is tops when it comes to box office appeal. And it will always stay that way, because the fact is, people love to be afraid. People love to be enchanted. People love to have their emotions played with. And who else does that better? No one but Count Dracula. That is why this character will forever remain immortal. So at this point, I kind of went in and I basically, the piece is practically finished at this point. Now I'm going to be adding in some of the effects of the aging process that you've seen on my Instagram posts. If you haven't checked out my Instagram, go to Pierce Horvath. It's just at Pierce Horvath or at deadscaredentertainment.com. You can check that out at Dead Scared Entertainment. That's our Instagram handle. Honestly, like now, just look up Dead Scared Entertainment anywhere, like now on Google or something. You'll find us, guaranteed. And the products that I'm using right now come from RetroSupply Company. Now, I am not sponsored by them by any means. I have talked with the creator, Dustin. He's an awesome guy. The team is extremely friendly, and their products are super amazing. Honestly, I do not know what I would do as a illustrator without their products, because I love the vintage look that they give my pieces. I mean, look at that. How I went from just a plain Jane picture to now something that looks like if I just had to photo scan this. Look at that. Amazing. And there you are right there. And that will complete our video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch Dead Scared Draws celebration of the 91st anniversary of Universal Pictures' Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi as the title character. We want to emphasize how important it is that you like, subscribe, and follow us on our social media. In particular, click the bell icon below. Like this video, follow us, get notifications, and understand that we are just beginning to cook here. And we would love to have you a part of the journey. So do yourself a favor. Follow us on Instagram. Like this video. Favorite it. Comment on it. Share this with your friends. Go on Facebook. Follow our page. Show your friends our Facebook too. Dead Scared Entertainment is going to be bringing you non-stop content. And we want to make sure that you are there for all of it. So that being said, I thank you so much for watching. And we hope to see you back soon. Because remember, you're watching Dead Scared Entertainment, where terror is our tradition.